This is my box. It is a fancy box. We're going to talk about the box. Why? Because inside the box, I have part of my collection of Bibles, okay? Because I wanted to go over everything that you guys have been asking me about different things on the Bible. Why are there different translations? What's the difference between the translations, stuff like that. So we're going to jump into it because I brought you a lot of Bibles. So in this box, we have a nice, good King James Bible. I have the LSB Bible. This is my favorite Bible. To answer that quickly, immediately, this is the most accurate English translation. This is a word-for-word translation, okay? So there's a distinction between a thought-for-thought and a word-for-word translation. LSB, one of the most accurate, if not the most accurate to this day. And you have wonderful things like this. This is a chronological Bible. This helps you to just kind of like analyze things in chronological order so that you can play with it and kind of go from there and check things out. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Chronological Bible is awesome. That one is specifically in the New King James Version. Then I have myself a nice, beautiful Geneva Bible. This is the 1599 Geneva Bible. It is beautiful. It is hard to read because the words are spelt differently than now, but Geneva Bibles are awesome. This is basically exactly what the King James Bible is based on, so whenever people are like, King James Bible is the best Bible, you just have an upgraded Geneva. That's all it is. The Geneva Bible was the first one to actually separate everything by chapters and by verses. Got myself a copy of a Tyndale New Testament. It is absolutely awesome. This was translated in 1536, and it has some like super duper funky way of talking in a lot of it just because it is extremely old English. Sometimes this is very hard to read, and primarily this is so old that it doesn't even have Jesus in there. If you can see that, I'm not sure if you can, where it still says Jesus. That's pretty cool. This has a lot of cool stuff. I've bounced back to this one a lot just to kind of check on certain things, certain translations, because it's a really cool thing. So, Tyndale Bible, awesome. I even have myself a Masonic Bible. So you have people who are saying like, well, the Masonic Bible says that Satan is God. That's not true. It's just a King James Bible. I know that because I own one of those Bibles. Then one of the worst Bibles out there. This is an NIV. I do not like the NIV. This was a gift to me very long ago when I was a kid. And yeah, I do not like the NIV, and we're going to talk about why I don't like the NIV, except for reading the Psalms. The Psalms, I think, in just my opinion, I think that the Psalms, the translation into the NIV, is the most beautiful and most poetic. The reason why is because it is a thought-for-thought translation, not a word-for-word. So is it the most accurate translation of the Psalms? Absolutely not, but it is so beautiful whenever you read the Psalms out of this book, just because they all sound so beautiful. So just briefly, really quickly, Psalm 51, have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love, according to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions, wash away all my iniquity, and cleanse me from my sin. For I know my transgressions, and my sin is always before me. Against you, you only have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight, so that you are proved right when you speak and justified when you judge. Surely I was sinful at birth, sinful from the time my mother conceived me. Surely you desire truth in my inner parts. You teach me wisdom in the inmost place. Cleanse me with hyssop, and I will be clean. Wash me, and I will be whiter than snow. Just beautiful, very poetic, gorgeous. I like that. But NIV actually as a translation is not one that I would recommend ever. And then finally, the Bible that I bring to church. This is a New King James Version. The reason why I prefer this one for church is just because I've read the King James Version a lot. The New King James Version I've read a lot too. And so it's just kind of easy for me to keep up with. But this guy has little margins on the side so that I can go through and I can take notes and everything. So I use this to grade pastors. Whenever the pastor says something silly that I don't agree with, I make sure I jot it down, and then I jot down biblical reasons and citations to why they got something wrong. But even have my little stickers on there. So if you want stickers, hats, shirts, stuff like that, taco-talks.com, go get yourself some stickers. They're nice stickers. But now, why are there different translations of the Bible? Why is it done so many different times? And really the simple answer is because English is one of the most rapidly evolving languages that has ever existed. And so if you were to go through this little stack of Bibles and you were to compare the King James Version translated in 1611, and obviously this is an updated version of the King James Bible, because in the actual King James Version, the original gigantic King James Version, the spelling is slightly different. Just like how the spelling is slightly different in the Geneva Bible from 1599. So 1611, 1599, and then going back to 1536 with the Tyndale Bible, this is very different than this, even on how they spell words. So within that short amount of time in English, the words, the way that they spelled the words even, have drastically changed and altered. Which is why something like the New King James Version came about, is because they wanted to do the exact same translation, but instead of it saying, thou doth hath the hair of ein goat, like that kind of thing, instead now it's you have the hair of a goat, like that, that kind of thing. Now, primarily, there are two different kinds of translations that you'll have. You'll have one that is based on something called the Codex, and you'll have something based on something called the Textus Receptus. That means the received text. So the Geneva Bible, the King James Version, these ones are based on the Textus Receptus. Same with the New King James. They are translated from the received text, which is essentially this collection of texts. And then the Codex translations, things like the LSB or the NASB or even the NLT and NIV, they're based on the Codex, which is even older copies of manuscripts. And a lot of those are really cool because there's cool history behind where people hid these different manuscripts. They hid them in caves and everything, and then we found them and then we translated them. But the problem that we come into with that is that most of these copies, most of these manuscripts are literally things where people went into their church, they were reading the letter, and then they copied it down on their own piece of paper, and then they brought it home. So in some cases, those people who are not professionals for copying it or anything like that, they just copied it for themselves for their own personal benefit, and then those were hidden and then later found by us and used to translate. So in some of those cases, they might have accidentally skipped a line, and so you'll see different verses in books like this that may or may not be omitted that exist within the Textus Receptus. Does that mean that this is kicking them out? No, because anytime that one of these Bibles doesn't have it included in that lineage, it is going to have it down in the footnotes, and it's going to say that it's supposed to be there or that it was there. It's just not there in the specific document that they translated it off of. So to give you a direct comparison real quick, we're going to go King James and we're going to go LSB. We're going to go to Acts 8. We're going to go to verse 36, 37. This is where Philip is traveling with a eunuch. And as they went on their way, they came unto a certain water. And the eunuch said, here is water, what doth hinder me from being baptized? And Philip said, if thou believest with all thine heart, thou mayest. And he answered and said, I believe that Jesus is the Son of God. And he commanded the chariot to stand still, and they went down both into the water, Philip and the eunuch, and he baptized him. Okay, now verse 37 there, which gives you that very specific requirement that if you believe with all your heart, then you may. Then the eunuch responds and says, I do believe with all my heart that Jesus is God. That is absent from certain Bibles. So if we go into the LSB, the Legacy Standard Bible, which is just the updated version of the NASB 2020, which I also have in here, but that one's in my glove box, so she's going to live there. How many people do you know that have multiple Bibles in their truck at any given time? Boom, so verse 36 in the LSB. And they went along the road and came to some water, and the eunuch said, look, water, what prevents me from being baptized? Then, so you see right there, it has it in brackets at verse 37. They put it in brackets. Why? Because it was not in the specific manuscript that this was copied from. But it says, and it's still included here, and Philip said, if you believe with all your heart, you may. And he answered, I believe that Jesus is the Son of God. And he ordered the chariot to stop, and they both went down to the water, Philip as well as the eunuch, and he baptized him. So it does still exist in things like that. However, you'll look into things like the NIV. Let's open this girl up to Acts real quick. And so going into the NIV, we have it right here. As they traveled along the road, they came to some water, and the eunuch said, look, here's water. Why shouldn't I be baptized? And then it immediately skips to verse 38. Doesn't have anything with the 37. It immediately goes from 36 to 38. And it just picks up in verse 38 right there, and it says, and he gave orders to stop the chariot. Then both Philip and the eunuch went down into the water, and Philip baptized him. So they completely exclude it right there, until you go to the footnotes at the bottom, and then down here it says some later manuscripts, and it has verse 37 written out plainly right there. If you believe with all your heart, you may. The eunuch answered, I believe that Jesus is the Son of God. So you see that in here. It still includes it, but it removes it from up here. So that's something that we have a little bit tricky. So regardless of what Bible you choose, it really doesn't make much of a difference. You just need to make sure that you're reading a legitimate translation. So like the New World Translation that the Jehovah's Witnesses use, or the Joseph Smith translation that the Mormons tend to use, that not anymore, they used to. Now they just stick with the King James. But still, make sure that you just have a real translation. So an LSB is my favorite. I recommend that the most. If you're new to the Bible, I like the NLT for new people. And if you want to be fancy, stick with King James or New King James. Either one of those is still perfectly fine. But the most accurate word-for-word translation that we have in English today is the LSB, the Legacy Standard Bible, and I recommend this one the most. If you have any other questions on this stuff, let me know. Go follow me on X. Let me know what's next. Go check out my store. I have shirts, hats, stickers, all the fun stuff available at taco-talks.com. Support me on Patreon. But let me know what's next. Follow me on X. God bless.